Righty, folks, we're going to give it about 30 more seconds before we kick off. So just bear with us one more second. All right, well, let's get started. Thank you for joining us for the Exit Advisor Small Business Town Hall series. We've got a really interesting one for you today. We've got a client of ours and a very good friend of mine, Alexandra Couvaras. She is the owner of Esperanza School, which is a really premier early childhood education program and school here in Houston, which we'll get into in a minute. As always, I'm going to give you the quick overview about our firm. We focus on lower middle market businesses, just like Alexandra's, who we will be talking about today, and help them work on preparing a really custom strategy to help prepare them for an exit, increase their valuation, get their books in order, and really look at their operations and financial in order to get things cleaned up. So we also, really pride ourselves on education. So today you're going to get a little bit of a schooling from I guess we could call you a teacher. And our format's a little bit different today. I'm actually here in person with Alexandra. So in just a second, I'm going to pass the mic and the camera over to her. But we're really excited to have her. She's a mover and a shaker. And apart from her very successful school that she's built essentially from the ground up, we're going to hear about her entrepreneurial journey, some anecdotal knowledge that she's going to share with everybody, and a little bit about the kind of weathering and navigating the stormy waters of COVID-19. As you can imagine, with a childcare business, that's very challenging, but she's done a really great job of doing that. So I'm going to pass it over to Alexandra now, and we're excited to hear her story and look forward to what she has in store for us.
Thank you, Andrew. Hi, everybody. My name's Alexandra Couvaras, and I'm an educator of young children and women, and I consider myself to be a classic entrepreneur. And what that really means is that I cannot still, after 40 years, read a P&L, and I don't use technology very well. There'll be no pie charts and no graphs in this little talk today, just a story that we want to weave together. I was invited here by the Exit Advisors to share it and of how I created it and invested along the way through these last 40 years. My goal is to create beautiful places, large spaces for large and small groups of people to belong. So one of the biggest things, my biggest accomplishments has been creating Esperanza School, and then also in investing in real estate along the way. As I was going through this journey, I realized that as I was taking inventory, I realized that I had started so many other businesses and that they had all failed. And one of the things that I learned is you have to put all of your attention to your biggest passion. And then if you're going to diversify, you're going to actually have to be able to create income through passive investments. So one of the things that I did in my life or I've attempted to do is I've started a restaurant. Who doesn't want to start a restaurant? I needed a place to hang out. I started a resale shop, a healing center, and an Airbnb, which is the only thing that's still actually working, and that's in Greece. So in case you ever want a lovely vacation, please come. So one of the things too is my story doesn't have any glitz or glamour. The glitz, what I have is just old-fashioned hard work, boots on the ground. My childhood, I grew up all over the world. My parents are Greek and Canadian. And I think that living in foreign countries shaped how I feel about what I do today. When I was growing up, I had a lot of interests. Starting at a very, very young age, I was always creating and designing. At 12, I had my first business, and that was with a beeper, and I took care of 6 to 8 children at a time in the block, and I actually stayed over on nights, and was very young, but I felt very old. By the time I was 15, I went to boarding school in Switzerland, and I started piercing ears for all of the women in the car and all of the girls actually in the dorm. And I charged 2 francs for each one of them. So some of my beginning endeavors really showed me that I could make some money. By the time I got to college, I came back to the States and I went to UT. I said, well, I need to have some other money to help myself through college. So I went to auctions and I bought old furniture and pianos, baby grands, and I refurbished them. And I sold the furniture on the sides of the street over at FM 1960 in Austin along the highways. And, you know, I was so excited. Anytime somebody bought a piece of my creations, I thought, this is it. I'm really, really doing it well. One of the other things that happened to me is a friend of mine in 1979 had an accident. She was unconscious. And they couldn't find any family members or how to figure out how to get her medical history. And I said, why haven't we created an ID card to hook up with a Xerox machine with all of our medical information on it? But I think I was way before my time because there was no such thing at the moment. One of the most important games I played as a child was Monopoly because I learned that I could leverage the real estate if I borrowed from the bank, which meant I rewrote the rules. And that allowed me to really, really accumulate a lot of real estate, even though it wasn't real. My studies in school were communications and video production. And then I took a master's certification in neurolinguistic programming, which is the study of art and science of how the mind works. And it's also to help dispel beliefs. So that's truly made a difference in how I work with my present staff at my school. Then I thought, well, in the middle of it all, I should go to acupuncture school just in case I really want to do that when I'm retired. I had a chance one summer to run a TV station in Kerrville, Texas, and it was a one-man show. I remember that I ran the camera for the 6 o'clock news. I also was the ENG reporter every day, and nothing happens in Kerrville. So then I would look to Houston or LA and I'd decide, oh my goodness, there's some big things happening here. Maybe they could happen in Kerrville. So I created that illusion. And I think that's probably where the term fake news might come from. One day, and one Christmas, I had an outrageous job. I was given the task of driving a team of horses down Westheimer, and I worked for Laredo Liquor, and I was to unload and set up all of their stands in the liquor stores all down Westheimer, the whole 6 miles. And it was a crazy time for me, but there wasn't anything that I thought I couldn't do or would try. Some of the beliefs I've used to get me through and carry is that I can do most anything. Leave people in a better place than you found them. I'm learning to do it afraid, which is why I'm here today. Understand what's missing that's missing when I'm problem solving. It gives me a different paradigm or perspective to look from. And there's always enough time. And I don't have to create an illness to stay home. I think I have an equivalent, or I jokingly say that I must have had 244 jobs before I found my real purpose and passion, and that is my school, Esperanza. Then I decided that I needed to be in graduate school. You know, let's get some higher education here. So I went back to UT, but I'd still just wanted to buy a business. So at this time, I was 23 years old. I brought the performer to my professor, and he showed the class. And he, in his very wonderfully Texas accent, he said, class, this is a classic example of a failing business. Don't buy this. And of course, I didn't listen. Because when you're an entrepreneur and you don't know any better, you just think, I want what I want when I want it. And I did. So one of the things that I want to start into is strategies. I love everything about running a business and investing in real estate. This gives me a lot of passion, and it gives me challenges and outcomes which equal satisfaction and money. What's important too along the way was first I had to listen to my mentors. They're very smart people all around you. They're wise people. Start to listen. And I was pretty young when I first did it. In Austin, the first mentor that really changed my life was a little Greek man named Miltos. And he had no higher education, but he ran a restaurant. And he always told me, you buy the restaurant and you buy the property and you create two entities so you can capture it all and rent from each other. And, you know, I followed his advice from as soon as I could actually buy my first property. Another person who was instrumental in my life is my father. Whenever I became afraid of a property that I thought I couldn't handle, my father said, can you afford it without the business in it? And I'd say, I think so. He said, then buy it and sit on it, and then you'll figure it out. And just having that support made all the difference to me. I really took that to heart in many of the decisions. I also created the most incredible child, my daughter, and she has an innateness of locating great properties, and she taught me a lot about negotiating with property owners and also with bankers. And last but not least is your accountants. If you have a really good accountant, I might say Gary Cooper would be a good accountant, they'll give you sound advice, and they will help you learn how to create the kinds of tax savings that you really need. One of the biggest things I did was start a series LLC for pass-throughs for all of my investments, and that has helped me lower my tax structure. To rent or not to rent? That's the big question. Shakespeare. My beliefs about owning real estate are very, very broad, because initially I rented because everybody else rented. But my experience with renting from others was that it turned out badly. You lost the money even though you could write it off, and at the same time it didn't make sense. I lost time, money, and my sanity dealing with landlords. So as soon as I could, when I bought my third school, or I opened my third school, I bought I bought the real estate and continued there, from there on, buying everything that I could as I grew. If you own or operate your business, you're going to need passive income, cash flow, and owning your real estate is your nest egg at the end. And it's also collateral for your new projects. All the properties that I did look at had to do with location, location, location. And I learned that from my daughter. She said, take a look. She could root out any of the upcoming areas that were happening in Houston, but we bought them before they became popular. So my investments now are all on the fringes of downtown, of Rice Military, in the fringes of the Heights, and also in the fringes of Independence Heights. And the reason that that's important is because I can get to every one of them. It's very convenient. If there's a problem, or if there's something that I want to create or construct, I don't have to drive all over Houston, and I save a lot of time. Watch out for those house of cards, though. Make sure your investments are able to be rented long term and not dependent on each other for survival. You need to be diverse enough. So what I did was that I took a look and I saw apartments is a really good thing, a restaurant, which it really wasn't a good thing, a warehouse, which was going to be my dream, the schools, which was really the best and biggest outcome for me, and land. So after setting up those series LLCs as pass-through vehicles for the gains and losses, I just settled in and I watched all of my investments grow. If one failed, it didn't affect the other. So it's very important that that stands on their own. Everything big starts with something small. So in the category of businesses, my very first business only had 32 children. It was located in Montrose. And because I was so bright-eyed and such a young entrepreneur, I didn't notice that when I bought it, that the doors had holes in it with no locks, and the tables were doors on bricks, and the chairs were bricks. And I didn't see any of that ugliness. And actually, I made it work because I also had learned to help people buy into my vision at the same time. My second school, I expanded to 74. And again, I rented. Then I rented an old mansion on Lovett Street in Montrose. It used to be a whorehouse, actually. And initially in 1919, it was a conservatory and it had a dance studio on the third floor and a wine cellar in the basement. And I had, one of the things that I did was that I learned to do all of the physical work myself with helpers. And that helped me save money and also taught me a lot about my future investments in real estate. My third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh and eighth school, I bought them, and they were all next to each other on Heights Boulevard. That totaled 311. So in a short time, I'd gone from 32 children to 311. My ninth location is what we call the ugliest building on Heights Boulevard. We call that the ugly duckling location. And it housed 95, and it was our only commercial building, and it was freestanding. And so that had a lot of different value than those little houses. Eventually, after paying them all off, I stopped to sell them to buy my final and last big school in Rice Military, which now houses 550. I did keep the ugly duckling school because of the value of the property and being a commercial building, and it also had space for 95 children. So start with one small location and go to 9 before the final one. That's part of the secret. I talk about the ugly duckling buildings because the one at 429 that I kept on Heights became an overflow building. If we got into trouble during hurricanes, it was the only one that really was standing and solid. And it also, I thought to myself, would become my retirement fund because I had two properties connected to it. And I knew that someday it might be of value. I also kept one of my very ugly little fourplex apartments in the Houston Avenue area. And I did that because on the outside, it really looks bad, and it also helps with the property evaluations. On the inside, it's a gem, and it produces income stream with very little work. The plan was to accumulate several small apartments, warehouses, and other businesses. So as I'm still running my business is generating enough cash flow that I can actually start start investing in other things. But also, when you have more money, banks want to lend you money. So it's very important to get a really good banking relationship and also to get a good line of credit so that you can use their money, just like the Monopoly board when I was little. You know, I just love large, ugly buildings that need a lot of attention. And I want to show you an example of it. And that example was my very first school, and my very last school, the big one at Esperanza. Take a look at what it looked like in 2010. There was nothing in the front. It really, it just reeked of sadness, and it needed a lot of work. And the moment I walked up there, because it took me 10 years to find it, I saw the whole vision laid out in my mind. And every night I would dream, and I'd keep a full-time carpenter on staff, and I'd say, today's dream is this, start building it. And as you look below after, when we started building all of the different things on it, that is the yard. Right here, you can see that yard is the same one that you're looking at up there. So it's an amazing thing when you can buy an albatross. Albatrosses are actually good if you also know how to do the work yourself or be your own GC. I'd like to show you a video now of what's been created in this very ugly building from the beginning. hope you enjoyed that. The comparison or the contrast of from the early beginnings to exactly where we are today took me 10 years to find that building so I could move all 8 of those houses on Heights to one campus. One of the reasons behind that was because when I did try to sell it after 28 years, every company that came said, we don't have anybody that can run 8 different schools all at the same time, even if they're close together. So I thought, well, if I'm ever going to have a future retirement, I'm going to have to find one big building. And I came across so many different properties in the Heights, but you know, if you've done this before, you always find the building or the thing that you need. I lost at an auction 3 times. Okay, that's okay, because I want them to see that. So I lost it in auction 3 times, and HISD has a rule that if they decide, even if you win, if they don't want to sell it, they stop it. And so I went back to auction, and I kept going up in the price. And finally, I recognized that that beautiful 36,000 square feet, 3-acre property was not going to be reproducible for that money, even if we offered 40% more in the money. So I called my bank, and because I had a good banking relationship in history, they immediately said yes, and that's how I closed it. You know, one of the pictures you see here is me in 1988 when I was only 7 years into the business. My daughter's actually the little redhead in the gray sweatsuit suit. And the funny thing about the article is that I was reading it over again, and the same questions that were there that many years ago are still the same questions that are haunting us today. And some things just never change. So we have still a lot of work to do in our industry. Talking about albatrosses again, those are really important, albatrosses. So that was a different slide. That's okay. We'll just stay there. So what is important is that albatrosses, when you see something, whether it's a school or a warehouse, you know, I had a dream that I wanted an art studio because it was very trendy. And I thought, well, let's do that. My daughter found a warehouse in a foreclosure, and it's run down and abandoned. It's horrible. It's 4 acres. It's a lot of land and a lot of building, 39,000 square feet. And what am I going to do? Because there's this terrible thing in the middle that was going to cost a lot of money to take out. It was a 13,000 square foot freezer, and I didn't want one. I wanted an art studio. And I didn't mind if it was going to take millions to do it, because I thought we would be really popular and it would be successful. But needless that I know that you have to really, you have to be aware of those things that are in front of you. The opportunities built into the obstacles. Eventually, I gave it up because once again, you have to really take care of your primary business. You can't spread yourself too thin. So I ended up renting it to a meat company for quite a lot of money every month. So it takes care of itself and makes money. And I have a long-term lease. And I bought it for $8.10 a foot, and it's off of Yale Street and Cross Timbers area. And I just knew that this area is going to blossom. So I'm going to be holding on to it in case other things fall around me. I tried my hand at a healing center, and I found this another albatross in the Heights, Sunset Heights, 26,000 square feet. It had a tennis court, a putt-putt golf, a giant oversized pool, a 3-story home, a pool house, and a garden area that I eventually planted all of the fruit trees that remind me of Greece. And I thought, I'm going to start a healing center for women, because I'm always really, that's my second passion, is helping people. And when I bought it, I realized, again, I couldn't spread myself too thin, but I also bought something that had been run by the Mexican cartel. And I was actually afraid to move into it initially for the first 6 months, because I found it strange that they had panic rooms built underneath all the staircases and alert buttons on every floor. And even the door they got from their St. Anne's Church has a bullet hole in it, so I still kept it. And I'd find shells all over the property, and I was afraid that if I moved in, they wouldn't know that the old owners hadn't gone yet. So I waited until all the coast was clear. But that albatross turned out to be a really good investment, because I bought it at a foreclosure, and now it's really gone up in value. Trend lines, please, thank you. Oh, trend lines, thanks. So what you want to know is, I always look for trends. And a long time, in 1987 is one of the reasons that I knew that I needed to move to the Heights, because I noticed there was a lot of young families moving in there, and it was affordable. And I thought this would be the perfect place to set up my second location, and also to get out of my renting situation. So I bought my first investment there, and that was the slide that was going to be there, you know, of me. 1988, that was when I was really young, and so then I just continued to increase by buying all of those properties on Heights. You know, I also said, why apartments? Recently, in the last 8 years, I noticed that there was an overbuilding of apartment complexes with very expensive units. And at first I said, nobody will want to rent our little ones compared to these beautiful new ones. And then I heard the rent, and the rent was so expensive. I said, well, the rest of us have to have some place to live. So I think this is a really good market to get into. So that's when I started investing in small complexes, 4 units and 8 units. And what I do with them is create a family, a community in there. So they might be known as street center community. And everybody gets introduced so that they all look out for each other, because in this day and age, there's a lot of loneliness. People are pretty isolated. So if you're going to have to live somewhere, you want to really be connected, and you have to get along with the whole community. By doing that, I realized if you could buy these properties, you ended up in a good position, because we were buying them before the area grew up, and then we renovated them. So we did put money into them, but that's not my thing, because I'm not really that kind of business person. I just really like creating beautiful places for people and spaces. And I know that I don't need the money every month. So I just let it grow, pay off its mortgage. And I know it's going to be that nest egg at the end of it. Let's see. Let's move into Avenue Grill. Avenue Grill was a calculated risk. You know, I thought, I want a restaurant so badly. I want a place to hang out and meet people and talk. And so I decided I should get in the restaurant business. And not realizing that the restaurant business is just like the childcare business. And also, I don't even know how to cook. And I never cook. And I bought it and renovated it. And I bought the property as well, just like Miltus taught me. And I had this incredible experience for about 3 months. But meanwhile, I had to go back to my other business. And because of employee situations and the rise in restaurants all around Houston, it was a lot of hard work to keep employees. So I eventually just closed it down. And I get a lot of offers on it every day, because it's at the end of Washington and Houston Avenue. So it's on the fringe of downtown. But I'm keeping it because I know that one day it's going to be really valuable. So again, another way, if you can afford to do that, do it. Let's go to think it and want it. Think what it means to be an entrepreneur. If you think it, you want it, you can get it. And that's what I did with that project at Roy Street, the final one that I'm in now. Remember, it took 10 years. I looked at a lot of ugly ducklings, and this final one turned into a swan. And I am elated, because it's really important to have a beautiful place. And this one is 36,000 square feet of wonderland for children, and also for women. You know, part of the process is finding the opportunity in the obstacles. Although I've already mentioned that piece, going back again, every time, whether it's in a business or a real estate deal, when I find an obstacle, I've been trained now to look for the golden shadow in it, the opportunity that's built into it. And so before I judge it, I use this 0.25 perspective that I move over. It's a paradigm shift that says, I don't know what's missing that's missing, so let me look into it a little bit more. And every time that I do that now, I see a whole nother array of solutions that unfold themselves, and I'm able to then choose another pathway to get to my end. Timing is everything. I hired advisors last year. It's almost been 1.5 years since we've been working, to help me sell my school. And in a few short months, they found the perfect buyer who also wanted to purchase the real estate. Do you know how difficult that is in this business? And my real estate had actually gone up in value tremendously. Because Rice Military is growing and it's popular, it's easy access to freeways and to all of the parks. It's in a very perfect area. So they picked me up and they dusted me off like a new pair of shoes. And you know what? I got an offer and it was amazing, more than I could ever imagine. I'm going to stop right there and we're going to go back to the story, the rest of the story of Esperanza. Andrew, you get into my story and you're forgetting to flip those slides, I think. Okay, meanwhile, okay, the rest of the Esperanza story, and when the wind stops blowing. So my dream had finally come true, and we could move the school. This is back in the past now, in 2011, to one big location, and now it was primed to be able to be sold in the future. I love projects that are challenging. I must be solution-based or just naive because I haven't yet met a problem that doesn't have a solution. My philosophy, as I've told you, about life is to create beautiful physical spaces for all of us to help people be the best they can be. Owning my school is twofold. It's creating and running a wonderful business, which is very satisfying. And the second one is my mission in teaching women how to live with strength in the society. I guess it's a mirror for me and what I need. So I teach them how to create cash flow, how to set up bank accounts, how to save money, how to work on conflict resolution, how to stand up for themselves. And it really helps us form a culture that keeps us connected and united. I always tell people that the two most important things they need to be careful of is their reputation and their credit. So keeping that in mind, I think that changes all of us. The time was approaching to close with the deal with the company that Exit Advisors had found for me. I was getting really excited, and at the same time I was digging my heels in because, oh my God, this is scary. What am I going to do? But something bigger was looming in the air. COVID-19 appeared, and poof, the whole business disappears. 40 years in a whiff. And I think, this can't be happening. Oh my goodness, there's mass panic, and COVID is everywhere in the air, and exposure equals COVID, and COVID equals ventilator, and ventilator equals death, and we can't breathe, and we can't touch things, and craziness. And then on March 19th, when the city closed us down and the world stopped, everything went quiet. The deal was off. There's nothing left to do. And I thought, I'm supposed to be retiring soon. I'm 64 years old. How's this going to happen? Do I have the energy? Where am I going to find it? So I reach down deep inside of myself and I say, boots on the ground, there's no time for this. We need to start our second backup plan now. Not knowing really how to deal with COVID. So I immediately call in our managers. We have 7 of them, and we start brainstorming the next day after we close. And I'm going to start doing this in a fast pace, like a storyline. So here's what it looks like. We brainstormed. We created protocols. We called in we practiced I'm so sorry. Let me just get it really clear for you. We closed down. All of a sudden, I'm looking at nothing. And I say to them, we have to be able to create a safety optics for everybody that wants to come back and to help the others to come back. With my video production background, I produced a protocol for pandemic and what we do at our school. And I rallied all my staff people, called the seamstress and ordered 400 masks to be made. I standardized taking temperatures at 8 stations in the business. I isolated 50 classrooms to make independent schools by putting barriers up between the classrooms. We have 4 acres, so I could create a classroom play yard for every classroom. And I also didn't allow anybody in the building. And I followed all the CDC guidelines. We did social distancing stickers, and then I realized that everyone thought that social distancing meant that you were standing on a brown sticker at Walmart, but it had nothing to do with the real meaning of what social distancing could do in preventing the spread. So part of that piece is no one was allowed in with symptoms. We had procedures for bleaching the outside and wiping down every single container, and we became so labor intensive, it was incredible. We opened up on April 5th with 148 staff people and 0 children. And I said, no problem, this is a great training ground. This was a great training ground. That's okay, just leave it, it's fine.
When you do it again?
No, not yet. This hadn't come to that part yet. That's good. Your team here right now, right? So what happened then is we practiced for 2.5 months with no children. Well, actually, we did get some children in May. We got 21 children with 148 staff people. I used my savings to keep all my people on because I realized that if I furloughed them or they went on unemployment, that it was too rich and that they wouldn't want to come back, and I would lose all of the richness that I had with all of the people that had been trained. So that was one of the things that I decided was best to do. I got a PPP program. It helped us, but it ran out in August. So here we were set. We were all wearing masks. We knew how to take temperatures. We didn't come to work if we were sick. We bleached, we rotated, we were independent classrooms. And I said, that's it, we've done. We've overcome COVID. We didn't have any COVID, but then we didn't have any children yet either. So the slide I have in front of you is you didn't come this far to only come this far. COVID was really my 9/11. On June 12th, after we just started getting back children for summer camp and to the school, we had our first community spread of COVID. Uh-oh, that was a dress rehearsal. I didn't realize that it was a dress rehearsal. All those last 2.5 months, we thought we were doing it right. Everyone looked like they were wearing a mask and everyone was washing their hands and sanitizing, and we were in trouble. And we hadn't studied enough with COVID to really understand the transmission or how we could prevent it, or even how you quarantine. All of those are different subsets of things that really need to be written down in a pandemic protocol. But we thought if we just did those baseline things that we needed. What staff didn't realize, and I'm going to explain a little bit about the community transmission, is that not staff, all people in Houston all over the country didn't realize that the transmission really comes not so much from the public, but it comes after you've gone out in public and you didn't wear a mask and you went home and you trust your family and have magical thinking. That no COVID could ever happen to me because I love my people around me and my friends. They didn't understand that if you got in cars with your air conditioning rolled up and both of you sat in the front seat with the window shut, that you could easily inhale that, because people who get COVID most of the time are asymptomatic. And we didn't understand about the contagious piece from 0 to 9 days. And so at that point, we didn't have tools, we didn't have knowledge. But and we also didn't understand the transmission once it got into the school. So we had a series of cases, singular cases after that, from July 12th from June 12th to July 14th. We ended up experiencing COVID in a way that was scary. At the same time, I alerted all my parents, and I wrote out a weekly COVID report explaining what classes were quarantining, who was in it, without giving names, of course. And initially, the feeling was it's just the staff bringing in COVID. And the staff thought it was the school giving them COVID. And the parents thought, yeah, it's everybody else but me. So eventually, when parents started to call us in with exposures, everything started to balance out. But still, we were trying to figure out how did that transmission really happen? And what we discovered is that people knew to wear masks, but because they didn't really relate to all of the information coming from the outside, they cheated with their masks. They wore it below their nose. They pulled it under their chin when managers weren't there in the classroom. And they didn't understand that breathing and sneezing or coughing, of course you shouldn't be there if you're coughing or sneezing, but any of those things could transmit it. And so by not adhering to this policy, that's how easily it was transmitted. And now it became a real thing for us. Because of that scare, I immediately added in 120 hand sanitizers, ordered 80 proof distilled vodka as sanitizer, and then I read on face shields, and there was a 96% efficacy. So I said, we're going to face shields on top of our masks. Because here's the deal. If you guys don't get the personal behavior dictates your outcomes, then at least if you get exposed, you're not going to expose any of our children or your coworkers. And I'm really happy to report that since July 14th, we've actually, on our 9th week now, we've had 0 cases of COVID, and nobody's been sick. And people are starting to understand how easy it is. When you ask anybody, they'll say, I wear a mask. I wear a mask all the time, except how did you get COVID? I'm not sure. I said, did you go to the break room and take it off and eat? And then you sat in that room 30 inches across from someone. And it was your hour because you said, well, this is my lunchtime. The boss can't tell me to wear something. Yes, I didn't realize that. I mean, the stories are so unique and interesting, but I use them to start small groups of training to all of my 148 people. And that was really the significant difference for them to start changing their behavior. I'd like to show you what we produced for the families as a pandemic protocol to get them back starting in the summer. And this is, again, we use a lot of video at Esperanza because we have sneak peeks and we catalog the children's lives as they stay here. Most families stay around 5 years, so they have a whole history of their child. So just take a moment to see what we did as an optic. And I've cut it short, so don't worry, it's not going to be forever. Again, thank you for watching this. We use video because the school is really large and we want to be able to reach people and let them know what we're doing about anything that needs to be looked at. But the next slide, and I don't mean to be rude about, yeah, you see, I finally, when I say you've got to wear a mask, you've got to wear a face shield, okay, and they're doing that. Finally, I said, cover your pie hole. And by saying that, everybody's shocked when they hear me say that. They start laughing, and I say, now it's input into your brain. I'm burning a new idea in. If you just cover your mouth and your nose, and you keep them covered, then we can continue opening up our businesses. We don't have to shut down. Schools can stay open. I have proof of that. I opened up our campsite with older children in the summer at that ugly duckling building on 429 Heights. And we had 80 children come in, and everyone had to wear masks. They were 5 years old, or 5 years old enough, or 4 years old enough. And we changed the whole rotation of the camp and it ended up being more intimate. Children didn't mind wearing a mask. I created a club, a superheroes club, that if you wore your mask, you got 5 points a day. And then they had bucks, superhero bucks. If they social distance, they got an extra one. Every hand washing counted for one. And they started gaining dollars. And from there, the general store opened up on Wednesdays and Fridays, and then they had their choice of how to shop. We also taught them how to save. So everything has a dual purpose. And that's really what I teach. I'm a Piagetian school. Jean Piaget is a Swiss educator. And he said children learn by doing, through process. And so do adults. So we're all doing this together. Let's see. One of the things that did happen when the COVID first happened, June 12th, we called licensing. We said, okay, this is our first case, or our first community. We didn't know it was community at the time. The community was 3 people actually. But we called in and they said, we can't tell you what to do, call the health department. So we called the health department and they said, have you talked to childcare licensing? And I said, they told us to call you. And they said, okay, but you need to call them back because we don't know what to do. And I said, are you guys overwhelmed? Yes, we're overwhelmed because we're trying to match up all of the names. Every agency calls in with a positive COVID name, and if we call in for the positive COVID name, they were getting confused, and the results were getting bigger and bigger. And I said, well, this is a problem, but do you want us to shut down? We can't tell you to shut down. And I said, she said, only you can make that decision. So I hung up. I looked at my managers and I said, the civilians are writing the rules now. And so we started, because initially the only black and white rule was quarantine equals 14 days. And the essential care workers were the only ones that had a different kind of rule to work with a 10-day status based on being symptom or fever-free for more than 24 hours. As we went through that, we realized as we were quarantining that the whole class that had the teacher in it had to go home for 14 days. And I thought, we're never going to start this school. Well, we're never going to start our businesses if every time there's an exposure or a possible exposure and we run for the hills and we don't really know what the exposure quotient is, then we're going to find ourselves having to just give it up, because families are not going to pay to be in quarantine if another child or another person gets exposed in the same class. So that's when we decided we had to look at it more critically. One of the things that we did was we consulted a doctor who helped us understand all the different kinds of tests. And we used a testing measure, and we used exposure quotient, and we used symptomology. And then we got ourselves, and I'm sorry I didn't give you a slide for this, but it shows you the process of the first day of exposure all the way through the 14-day and 21 days. And it shows you the baseline of how contagious you are and when you're starting to not be contagious. And so then that helped us start. We use a calendar. We write down the first day that the person thinks they got exposed. Every staff calls in if they have, or calls in if they don't feel well. When we say stay home, we say wait 3 days to 5 days to test. But then the testing started taking 2 weeks to come back, and that wasn't really very effective way of running that. So what we do is we call families if we have an exposure who we don't know if it's even positive yet. We tell them it's a possibility and that we're keeping them away. The infected person is isolated, and we get to continue on, and we ask them to look for symptoms in their children. As you know, symptoms in children, especially even infants, really, it looks more like a runny nose and a low-grade fever for a couple of days. So each time a parent took their child of those cases that we had 3, took there are actually 5 total by the time we finished, took their children to the doctors, and they would say teething, allergies, just a cold. And so again, we're not blaming doctors, but you couldn't trust their diagnosis in the midst of a raging pandemic. So again, erring on the side of caution, we look at everybody, nose runny, stomach ache, and if they get through, they have to leave within 45 minutes. To this day now, because we haven't had any COVID, it's not that we don't expect it to come back. We are. We're really amping up for flu season and COVID because a lot of times the symptoms look the same. So we know that we're not going to really be able to delineate that. But what we do know is by wearing the face mask and the shields, that we have pretty effectively stopped the transmission. And again, using all the safety procedures that are in place to keep the germ control down, you're really going to stop a lot of different kinds of germs anyway. And we're looking forward to it, even though we're hearing a lot of negativity about the winter. We're looking forward to seeing how our new pandemic protocol is going to play out this winter. And we're still moving forward as we always do. You know what, I want to end on a final, I don't mean to overkill you with videos, but I do want to end on our final video, which is what we're sending out to new families coming out about who we are now, since we no longer can operate like the school we've always been. So please just bear with it for one last time, and then we can be open for questions. April, when we had 0 students in the space now because of the staffing piece. So again, we're faced with a new obstacle, and I know there's going to be a new opportunity. I think inside of it is creating new energy with new people coming in. And I've just stabilized the plane, stabilized myself to go through the winter in a way that we're able to maintain what we have and provide the beautiful and excellent quality services that we do give our clients. You know, I put the slide up here. Creativity requires the courage to let go of certainty. And this certainly is one of the cases where there is no crystal ball. We have no way to do it. I know that from our perspective at Esperanza, we have figured out how to keep open. And I know it's possible, but it's going to require a mental shift, a psychological shift of coming back in the present moment and recognizing that if you just do the basics, the simple basics, and learn how to social distance and how to do what you need to do at home, we could actually get everything started back up again. And that is my hope. The ending of this story hasn't been written yet, so we'll wait to see, and I look forward to it. Thank you. Thank you for listening today.
Thank you, Alexandra, for going through your story and sharing that with us. What we'll do now is we're creeping up on the hour, so maybe we can get one or two questions in. If you have them, throw them in the chat or in the Q&A feature at the bottom. And we've got one from Paul. So his question is, you mentioned some of the questions that you asked yourself in 1988 that you're still asking yourself today. What are some of those questions, and what are your biggest challenges today post-COVID?
Well, when I was reading the article, and I didn't bring it, unfortunately, and it's too small to read on the screen, I don't remember the specific details, but it does have to do with childcare as an underserved area of our community. And that means that more money and abilities have to be put back in there, more education of people. So they were talking about the cost to parents and the cost to running a child care center. And 40 years later, if you looked at the prices I didn't put the prices on that one. I didn't give you the second page. I'm sorry. But way back then, you could see the prices, weekly prices and what parents have to pay today. And even then, even the way that I run it, and I don't necessarily have the same problems as childcare has, because I recognize that there was a way to increase, have an infrastructure. So if you have a very big base of young children, then you're able to have very low ratios, actually 33 to 47% lower ratios as the children age compared to what the state licensing requirements are. And so I don't know if I answered your question very well, but it was really about how all the woes of childcare are still here. The pay, the lack of education, and the underserved communities.
I've got another question that someone asked about more of the financials of school, but I remember you mentioning this to me when we were working together. Explain how you built your business from the ground up, from the margins, rather than from trying to get a projected revenue number, but trying to know what your bottom line wanted to be and building your business from that standpoint.
Well, not really having a business background, and I do decision making with intuition. So part of that piece is when I go to a new project, I look down, I get the square footage. I know that at the time, back in the olden days, it was 30 square feet, and now it's 35. And I would make a decision based on minus a 20% margin area with the spaces that are not used. Then I understood, okay, I'm going to go get a license for this amount. And then I understood what my mortgage was going to be. And then I put all of these figures in a space, and I said, okay, I have to borrow enough money to get this cash flowed and safe. And I don't advertise at all. 20 years ago, I stopped advertising in little magazines, and to this day, I don't even have social media. But it's all word of mouth. And from that piece is having really good quality, being able to react on my feet really fast when things go awry. I mean, when there's danger or shifts or that. So by doing that, somebody tells somebody else, and then they call and they get in and they go on a tour and they get on a wait list. And by doing that, I build it one child at a time. And then I'm able to expand to another group. And I certainly don't want to spend a whole lot of time getting into a lot of bogged down details, but there is a method to the madness. So if anybody wants more information, we can actually have a conversation.
Yep, that's what I was going to suggest is, we're here on the hour, a minute over, so we promise not to keep you past 1 o'clock. But thank you, Alexandra, for your time today, sharing your story.
Thank you for listening.
And, as usual, join us next Wednesday. We do this every Wednesday at noon. We'll have Jason Knight, our business partner, He does the EOS implementation, and he's going to be discussing techniques that successful leaders use to run effective meetings. So everyone hates meetings, so this could be a very good tool to make them more productive. So we'll see you next week, and thank you so much for joining us.